Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Welcome to Story by Story, sharing the human experience. I'm Kate Dudding, one of the co-hosts. Today we have a little different format because our guest teller is also the other co-host, my friend and working partner, Joe Doolittle.
And it's great to be here, and it's a little different sitting in this chair, I might say. So it's going to be fun, I think. Kate and I often say that we're married, but to other people, because we do spend a fair amount of time doing production work on behalf of Story Circle Productions.
Yes.
And gee, I got to say, Sunday afternoon at Proctor's was just a great afternoon, Kate.
You mean word plays in the gallery, spine-chilling stories from the dark?
I was just mesmerized, and I was frightened a little bit by the stories. And so it's just a great event, and we have them almost every month, right?
Yes. Now this year we're doing it a little with a lot of trust.
A lot of trust.
That you and I came up with the titles, and then we put it out to our storytellers in Story Circle of the Capital District. Do you have any stories that fit these titles? And so, unlike Telebration, where we hear each story and we try to figure out how they would fit together in a program, here we're just sort of on blind faith that our tellers are professional and that they say it fits the topic, and it does, and it was sure proven to be true on Sunday. That I kept as the MC, I kept on making remarks. Are there any more lights we could turn on in here? And boy, I'm glad it's going to be light when we get out of here, because whoa!
It was a fun afternoon, and the eats were fun, and you know what's happening right when the volunteers come and stay for the program.
Yes.
You know, they have other options at Proctor's on Sunday afternoon.
Right.
But they stayed with storytelling.
And not only through the intermission where they run a beer, wine, and soda cart, but they stay for the rest of the program too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So file that one away. When we come to coming attractions, we'll tell you about the next event, which is a little variation on wordplay. It's called Telebration, and we want to spend some time on that. We like to have a format where we talk a little bit about storytelling, and then we tell some stories.
But Joe, I'm interviewing you.
Oh,
remember?
That's right. I'm not the co-host today. Okay.
So Joe, how did you get involved in storytelling? Isn't that the question we always ask people?
Yeah. I think I've been a storyteller since I was old enough to talk. I must say, and 25 years ago, my wife, my dear wife, saw the ad for Story Circle's meeting in the newspaper and said, you should go and check this out because it's what you do and it's who you are. And I looked at it and I said, that sounds pretty interesting. And soon thereafter, after the first meeting, there was a concert with a couple of those storytellers up at Cafe Lena. And I just realized that it was just a delightful episode. And I didn't really tell as a storyteller, but I was doing a lot of staff development work. I was doing some teaching at the graduate school at SUNY, and I used stories a lot. And I began to be a little bit more disciplined in the method. Many people, when they hear about my storytelling now, refer to me as being overly loquacious at times. So maybe there's help to the method.
Well, I think of you as a natural-born raconteur.
Is that I can't use the S word on the camera, but I understand what that means. Okay.
No. I mean, someone, as you said, who has always been telling stories, and it's just part of what you do. That and raconteur means it's a story as opposed to somebody who just talks a lot on and on and on and jumps from one subject to the other, and in order to stop them, you have to wait for them to take a breath. That's how I learned. I had a coworker once who was like that. But you come to an ending point, so that makes you a raconteur and not a babbler.
One of the basic elements is, a story has a beginning and a middle and a point of crisis and some resolution and an end. And usually the resolution is the end, but sometimes there's a little bit of a benediction. So yeah, the method can be helpful. Having the theory is useful because it builds some learning. So I want to tell a story that I like to tell stories that are personal, and I like to tell stories that are historical. And as I've gotten older, some of these themes come together in ways that are kind of interesting.
You mean you've lived long enough that your life is history?
I've lived a little history, yeah, and most of it's been good. The other part of it is that the first time I told as a storyteller, just to stand up in front of an audience, was at a celebration in the mid-1990s, and we were having them at the GE Research and Development Center in their auditorium. And it was a story that had come out of my own life, so it's a personal story. But I like to think that stories are generative, so this story has generated a few other stories. And is it okay if I tell the story?
Well, generative meaning people hear that and they go, oh, that reminds me of when something happened in my life. That's what you mean by generative.
I think the generative part of it is that happens during the listing of the story. And then in this case, the story actually has been replicated, and I've heard about it.
Whoa!
Not too bad, huh? That's like generative squared. And the story starts with a question. How do you establish a tradition in your family? How do you establish a tradition? And what is a tradition? Literally, the root of the word tradition in Latin is to literally hand over. Dite is the fingers, to hand over. So when you establish a tradition, you're literally handing something on. For example, many people probably hang their Christmas stockings in a place that's very similar to they hung them on the door, in their own home as a kid. If they were on the doorway of their bedroom or over the mantle of the fireplace or wherever, that's a certain tradition. And who sits where during Thanksgiving dinner is a tradition. And this is a story that happens to be about establishing a tradition in the Doolittle family. In one of my lives, for many years, I've been a chaplain volunteer at Albany Medical Center. And the director of pastoral care there, Harlan Ratmeyer, is a good friend and a storyteller. And we were having coffee together before Thanksgiving, soon after Harlan had moved back to take the job at Albany Med. He had been our interim minister in Schenectady. And we're having coffee, so I said to him, Harlan, how about coming to Thanksgiving dinner? He says, oh no, I think I'm going to go to the Mathises' house. Now, the Mathises are members of our church who tragically had lost a college-age daughter to leukemia when we were benefiting by having Harlan be our intern. And Harlan left that interim role because we got a full-time minister and kept in touch with the Mathis family. And came back and actually did her memorial service. It was quite touching, quite sad. But I said, so you're going back to the Mathises for Thanksgiving? And he said, yeah, and I'll sit in Jossie's place. And I said, you're going to sit in Jossie's place? How do you know it's Jossie's place? He said, well, Jan, the mom, she has a tablecloth, and for every holiday they have a tablecloth, and the people who sit at a certain place trace their hands on the tablecloth, and then she goes over it in needlepoint on her sewing machine, and she puts the date and the initials. So when I go to Thanksgiving dinner, I'm going to sit where Jossie sat from the time she was 4 until the Thanksgiving before she died, because her hands are there. Wow. Well, I was awed. And we talked a little bit more, and then we went our ways for the day. But when I got home that night, I said, you know, I got this great story. And I told my wife, that beloved Gay, that story. And she looks at me and she said, gee whiz, that's great. You know, we ought to make one for your mother. Well, my mother was 94 years old. And my mother's birthday is Christmas Day. So we've always been challenged to do the birthday and the Christmas thing, and you know, it's been a little tension. Now I gotta back up because, you know, there's a certain tension between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. And I gotta say that in my experience with my wife and my mother, it could be a capital T at times. It could be that way. So I looked at her and I said, you really want to do this? She says, I think I really do. I think it would be really nice. And you know, people are coming here for Thanksgiving, so people could trace their hands and maybe do a little messagey thing. And I don't think I could needlepoint it, but I got a lot of calico left over from another project. I can get some more. And why don't we go out and buy a nice blue tablecloth as the background? That's her favorite color. So we did. Now, people did come to our house for Thanksgiving, and my mother was there, but in the kitchen and in the dining room, but I was secreting people into my office where they would trace their, and, well, I was in awe that Gay was doing this. It was quite something. And some of the messages were kind of neat coming in, like, you're wonderful. You're the best grandmother. Wow. Well done. Our family is crazy. That came from one of our Valley Girl great-granddaughters in California. But they were really neat. About 2 weeks before Christmas, as Gay is getting the layout kind of settled, she says to me, she says, you know, Joe, it would be nice if we had your mother's hands in here. I said, my mother's hands? How am I going to get a trace of my mother's hands without blowing the... She says to me, she says, that's not my problem. Yep. So I go over to my mother's apartment in her assisted living facility, and I explain to her that I need to have traces of her hands because my Sunday school class, which I didn't really have, but I told her I had, needed some old hands, and their hands were all little hands. So could I trace her hands? Which I thought was a pretty good way of doing it. And I brought them home. Now, one of our traditions as adults is that we kind of pass where Christmas is, like we pass where, and it was my older brother Larry's turn to host Christmas. And we went over to his house in Castleton, and we opened some presents, and then we had our dinner, and then we played Pictionary, and then it came time for the birthday part of the day. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon. And we get called to the cake. And we walk into the dining room, and there's nothing there but a blue tablecloth. Now, my mom's eyes weren't that good. And she looks around, where's the cake? And then she sees the tablecloth. And my brother, the lawyer, begins to jump up and down like a 12-year-old and saying, Ma, look at the table, look at the table. It's our hands, Mom. It's all our hands. Happy birthday. And she came over and she began to look at these hands. Right here is the tablecloth. And they're all there. And she looks at them and she looks over at my wife. And she says, you did this for me, didn't you? And Kay says, yes, I did, Mom. It's beautiful. Oh, I love you so much. And I love you, Mom. Now, at the time, 37 years of marriage, that's the only time I can ever recall hearing my mother and my wife say that they loved each other. And the tension went away, and the wonder went away, and the story has grown in the family as we've had new people added through marriage and birth. We've got little handprints on there.
Yes.
And it's been a wonderful tradition. And I've told this story. I've told this story many times because I really love to tell it. And I know of 6 other applications of hands on tablecloths for 50th wedding anniversaries, for significant birthdays, for other things. And the other carry forward from this is if you look at the middle of the tablecloth, in between those gnarled hands that are my mom's, is the phrase, "Blessed be the tie that binds." And as a kid visiting my grandparents on the farm in Northfield, Massachusetts, we go to the big old church. And at the end of the service, they would sing as a benediction, "Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kindred minds is like to that above." And so we carry a tradition in our hearts and in our hands for the love of families. And I share that with you in hopes that it's caused some thoughts to stir in your mind and your heart, and maybe down the road with your hands.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
And that was the first story I ever told in public. And I held up the tablecloth, and it's been a very special memento. We've shipped it off to other members of the family in faraway places for special occasions. We've had, if you'll excuse the expression, we'll have pilgrimages to great grandmas to have their hands added to the, and we use it at various times of the year, particularly at Thanksgiving.
I hope not with any spaghetti sauce, though.
We've been very careful about that. We've got it Scotch guarded and all that other good stuff.
Well, I know Gay knows her cloth, and
Yeah.
and your grandmother's hand, your mother's hands, I'm sorry, are the only ones that are not in calico, which means a little print. Everything else has multiple colors involved in it, but hers are the only ones with a solid color, so they stand out. Yeah. I know your wife is very clever, and she's very sweet.
She's been, they talk about the wind beneath your wings. She's had to do some heavy lifting in our relationship at times, and I like to think that this is not heavy, but it's art and it's treasure, and it's an example of the grace of a wonderful heart, who has every right to not be as loving towards the relationship at times, but has gotten through a lot of that.
Sharing is sometimes a challenge.
Well, if you're a 2-year-old, everything you see is yours, that kind of thing. And we all grow out of that to an extent. But
Yeah. I was thinking sharing you.
oh, yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah. That.
at any rate, I want to kind of just go back to a couple of other things within. One of the things that I have to compliment you about is this month in October, we're going to have our 100th Story Sunday.
Oh, we had.
We had it. Yes, we did.
Well, we're in that little awkward time warp where we are taping November's program in the middle of October. So.
Yeah, and I think that, as viewers, you might be curious how it all started. And it started because we had an idea that.
Yeah, I remember talking to you on the phone. I think we had, Story Circle, the Capital District, had produced 3 or 4 telebrations. And we had accumulated a list of names and addresses. That was Tom Weekly's suggestion. Oh, well, if you're going to do telebration, you need to, you're going to do a series of events. You need those addresses to let people know of the subsequent one. And the way to do that is to have door prizes and have on the back of the door prize chit. Am I telling too much? On the back of the door prize chit, not only their name, but if you put blanks for their address, people will pretty much just kind of fill it out automatically without thinking. Now we put a disclaimer in like size 5 font. We will only be using this information to tell you about storytelling events in the Capital District. We do not rent, sell,
Right.
or let
otherwise
anyone else
else-
get their hands on it. Haha, hands.
You are the caretaker of that.
Yes,
Right, you are the
yes. So, so we had about, I think, 500 names, and I think I said to you, it's a shame we don't have, more than one event a year. And I said, it'd be really great if we had a storytelling dinner series like they have over in Stockbridge. At the time, there was an in south of Stockbridge that after the leaf season but before springtime, on Sunday evenings they had storytelling where their storytelling mingled with the meal. So I said, it would be really nice if we had something like that here. And you said,
I know Angelo Mazzone. He's a neighbor of mine. I'll ask him what is possible.
now this is Angelo Mazzone, who at that time, his empire was smaller, but the crown jewel was the Glenn Sanders Mansion.
So I had coffee with Angelo, and I explained that we wanted to have a dinner series, and we do it on a Sunday when he wasn't otherwise busy, and he could have the bar business, and he just had to give us a good deal on the dinner. And he looks at us and he says, "You want me to treat you like the Rotary Club?" And I said, yes. And he has done yeoman's work, that crew. So if you haven't been to a Story Sunday, we got them coming up. They're always fun, and they're always great entertainment and great food and fellowship, because people sit with each other at table, and it's kind of like a church supper without all the praying, what I could say.
And my takeaway from that is not being intimately familiar with church suppers, is that one thing that surprised us was the tables are for 8 or 10 people, and most times people come in smaller groups. And we have 4 courses of stories interwoven with 3 courses of food. And when it's time for the next course of stories, one of us would get up on the platform and people would continue to talk. And they weren't just talking with the people they came with. They were, and it was like, so I mean, I hadn't realized that's one of the purposes of an MC, is to get people to stop talking so that they can start listening again. And then at the end, about half the tables leave as soon as it's over, and about half the tables still are talking because they're not through with the conversations with either their own party or the table at large.
So Story Sundays has built fellowship for all of us involved, and it really has started a production company that has grown to be part of Proctor's and laced into the community, both here and regionally, and through some of the work that Kate does with the National Storytelling Network. As the webmaster of many storytelling sites, really had national connection. So our balance of being the enthusiast and the practical doer has been one that's actually produced some really wonderful things over the years. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's definitely a joint effort that sometimes, I'm working on part of it, and then I call you and go, which in Dudding talk means, I don't know what to do now. How do we get out of this? Right. And then you come up with some idea, and vice versa.
Well, it's worked. And, the other thing about Kate is she's a very good storyteller. And I think that...
Oh, I'm not done here yet.
Oh, you're not done here.
Okay. So if we've just started a Facebook page for our productions called Story Circle Productions.
On Facebook.
On Facebook. So if you want to follow us and get the inside poop on what's coming up and what's happened, and I'll be putting articles, pointers to articles about storytelling in general. For instance, Storytelling Arts in Indiana, Ellen Munns, who's the director there, posted an article about a middle school, where someone had the idea of let's get the students to know the teachers. It first started out with the teachers, and they put the teachers in a bunch of different groups. those who spoke a different language at home, and those who came from another place, those who wore glasses, and all kinds of different groups, and asked them questions like, what's difficult about being a member of that group? What do you like about being a member of that group? And somebody took all these film interviews and put them together in a podcast and showed it to the student body. And they liked it so much, the students started doing this with each other. And that it took, you know, sometimes diversity means being separate. But when the students kept on hearing these about their classmates who were different today because of the topic, but who were the same, you know, next week because of it, you know, they didn't wear glasses, you know, It really brought the whole school together, and it was that they were sharing their stories. And the power of story is incredible.
It is. It really is.
So that's what you'll be learning on you'll be exposed to on our Facebook page. So Story Circle Productions, if any of you are Facebook people, please join us there. And every once in a while we'll have some little deal, I thought.
Oh, some little deal like
this all started yesterday, so it's very new. Some little deal like we'll have a drawing for a pair of free tickets to something or other if you comment on this Facebook post.
There you go.
By, you know, some time limit. And so it'll be worth your while to make us like our page.
And I would never be as computer literate if it wasn't for you, Kate. I'll tell you, you have done great jobs.
Hey, I'm a certified geek. I have a master's in computer science.
There you go.
Union College.
Who would have thunk? Right. Well, before we do the current events, do you want to tell us a story? I tried to get that out of you before, but I'm going to go back to it because I figure, you know, I would love, and you would love, to have a story from Kate.
Okay. This is one of the stories I've been telling the longest. I've been telling since '95. So this is one I heard one version of up at Cafe Lena, the story crafters, Jerry Burns and Barry Marshall from Philmont, New York, which is mid-Hudson region. Yeah. They were up there and they told a version of this story. I found a couple of others, and then I've, as storytellers usually do, crafted my own with bits and pieces from all of those. Once there was a man named Sean Kiley who lived in a little cottage in Ireland with his wife, his father, and his blind mother. They were very poor. They didn't have any tablecloths at all. No. And one fall, their harvest was very poor. So every morning that winter, just before dawn, Sean Kiley would go out hunting, hoping to shoot some animal, maybe even a squirrel would be welcomed in their stew pot to complement the potatoes and turnips. Well, one morning, Sean Kiley was out in that early light before dawn and was crossing a harvested field and saw something white out of the corner of his eyes over by the edge of the woods. And he turned thinking, oh, it's probably some animal grazing on the harvested stubble. I often see animals like that, but this one's white and it's very large. I wonder what it could be. So Sean Kiley started very quietly walking towards that large white animal. And then he stopped because he was close enough to recognize what it was. It was a huge white stag, a huge male deer with an enormous rack of antlers. Oh, Sean Kiley stopped, and this was a magnificent creature, and the beauty of it filled him. But then he remembered his family's hunger, and he started looking at it like food. The meat on that creature's bones, it could feed my family for weeks. So, reluctantly, he started now stalking that animal, only moving when its head was eating the stubble, turned away from him, and freezing when the animal's head was anywhere in his direction. Finally, he was close enough to shoot the white stag. He raised his gun, and again, the beauty of that creature filled Sean Kiley, and he just admired it. And then he remembered the hunger of his family and raised his gun again. And at that exact moment, the white stag raised its head, and their eyes met, looking into each other's eyes. And then the white stag spoke. "Sean Kiley, if you will spare my life, I will grant you one wish." Well, Sean Kiley thought very quickly, whoa, this is a white stag. They're very rare, and it speaks, and it knows my name. Oh, it truly must be a magical creature. It could grant me one wish. Yes, I will gladly spare your life for one wish, because I belong to a family who needs at least one wish to help it. For my one wish, it's very hard to pick just one wish. The white stag said, "Sean Kiley, I will give you till tomorrow morning at this time to decide on your one wish. Meet me here tomorrow." And then the white stag turned and strode off into the woods. All thought of shooting any animal had completely left Sean Kiley's mind. He just headed home thinking, well, what should my one wish be? But by the time he got home, he was no closer to an answer than he had been when the stag had given him the opportunity. So Sean told his family what had happened. Then he turned to his father and said, "Father, if you had one wish, what would it be?" "Oh, Sean, if I had one wish, well, you know we had a poor harvest this year, and part of that was because I wasn't strong. I'm not as strong as I used to be, nor as steady on my feet, so I wasn't able to plant as much, and if I had one wish, it would be for a lot of gold, because with a lot of gold, we'd never be hungry again." "Thank you, Father. That's a good wish." And then Sean turned to his blind mother and said, "Mother, if you had one wish, what would it be?" "Oh, Sean, if I had one wish, well, if the wish was just for myself, you know, I've always wanted to see the faces of my loved ones. So if I had one wish, it would be for my sight." "Oh, that's a good wish, Mother. Thank you." And then Sean turned to his wife and said, "Wife, what would your one wish be?" "Sean, you've known what my one wish has been ever since we were married. You remember our two children, the wee ones, both of whom died before their first birthdays. My one wish has always been for a healthy child." "Ah, wife, yes, I know that's your wish." So it was very quiet around the Kiley cottage that afternoon, and when they sat down for their supper, to their watered down stew, that was all they had been able to put in it that day, extra, just some more water. They weren't talking much, but all of a sudden Sean got a smile on his face, and he went to bed that night and fell asleep as if he was a man who had absolutely nothing on his mind. It seemed as if he had decided on his one wish, but he didn't tell anyone. But did he decide on his father's wish for the gold, or his mother's wish for her sight, or maybe he decided on his wife's wish for a healthy child? But that next morning he was up while it was still dark, And he had been waiting for quite a while at that spot at the edge of the woods when the white stag strode out. "Well, Sean Kiley, have you decided on your one wish?" "That I have. My one wish is for my mother to see my healthy child rocking in its cradle made of gold."
Wow! There you go. There you go.
So if you're ever given one wish, just keep on talking. My one wish is for a big party with Colin Firth and Pierce Brosnan and and my husband and Robert Redford. He's getting a little wrinkled.
He's getting a wrinkled.
No, I just keep on talking and oh yeah, and we lobster needs to be on the menu and chocolate. Several anyways, you get the point. But what's also interesting about this story is there's a Jewish version where the husband himself is blind, but he and his wife are poor, but they've been very good people, very good neighbors. And so Elijah comes down from heaven to give them one wish. And this poor blind man's wish is I wish to see my children, he's upped the ante, my children eating off of plates of gold. Same story, and whether it started in Ireland and traveled to the Mideast, or whether it started there and came back, or whether it started someplace else independently and went in both directions, who knows and who cares? It speaks to many, many people.
Well, and it also speaks to kind of the core principle of the story, or the line that holds the story together about goodness being somewhat rewarded and being clever enough to take on the gods, small g, is really one of those things that's present in many cultures. Given my background, I kind of like to think that it was the Irish monks spreading the story through Europe as they went there in the Middle Ages, or after the Middle Ages.
Well, Galway was a major port during the time of Columbus. Before he crossed the ocean blue, he visited Galway, it is said, and worshipped in the cathedral there. And so it was one of the major ports going around. And I think it's the 5 families who made their wealth during this time of trading.
Great story, Kate. Great story.
Thank you.
What do we got coming up in November?
Well, let me check my notes. We have Telebration, our 17th Telebration. Telebration is a program that's held all around the country and in other places in the world to celebrate storytelling for adults. It was the idea about 20 years ago of a man in Connecticut, J.G. Pinkerton, and it has spread and it is propagated by the National Storytelling Network now. And ours is going to be on November 4th at 2 p.m. That's a Sunday at the GE Theater at Proctor's. And our title this year is Wild, Weird, and Wonderful.
Wild, Weird, and Wonderful. And how many storytellers are going to be there?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I just blew it. 8. We have 8 storytellers. And no, we have 9 storytellers, and our MC, Karen Pillsworth, makes 10. We have Lolly Davidson from Saratoga, Janet Carter from Saugerties, Margaret French and Joe Peck and Betty Cassidy from Saratoga, Nancy Marie Payne from Bern, Eliud Nieves from near Ithaca. He told the Telltale Heart at our spine-chilling event.
Wonderful.
But on another flip side, he's telling a Native American an African-American humorous story. Marnie Gillard from Niskayuna and Gil Payette from Grafton. He's a new member. He and Iliad are new members.
He's really a cowboy from Arizona. So he's
well, he grew up here, but he spent a lot of time in Arizona, and now he's come back with stories from the Native American cultures there. So there will be door prizes, there will be refreshments, and the money raised Do you want to tell them about that?
Well, the money is something that storytellers don't get a payment for this. They waive that in favor of a scholarship fund that over the years has been used to fund over 80 performances in community venues and libraries around the region. And we like to think that libraries are part of our family of passing on stories.
Right. Libraries, museums, community organizations, that there was a program last month with Marnie Gillard at the Hibernians in Albany.
Right.
That was funded by Telebration funds to spread the word about storytelling. So.
What else?
What else? Well, it's me. It's me. For some reason, this all came together. But I do not organize the storytelling open mic in Saratoga. My friends Janine Laverty, Christy Keegan, and Margaret French do, and I was asked to be the featured teller on Monday, November 12th at 7 p.m. at Cafe Lena. I get 20, 30 minutes as the featured teller. Then there will be an open mic of storytelling before and after. And it's a modest fee, and you can also purchase for $1 coffee, tea, or goodies.
And the goodies are pretty good.
Yes.
They really are.
Yes, they're homemade.
And the stories are pretty good, too. So there you go.
So, and Story Sundays at the Glenn Sanders Mansion. Why don't you talk about that one?
Well, Story Sundays in November 18th is a themed program called Take Me Out to the Ball Game and Other Stories to Be Thankful For. And it's really stories by Betty McCanty and Kate Dudding. And the theme is one that fits with stories that are important in the lives of people, and since it's going to be right after that World Series that may not include the Yankees, given the things that have happened, but it's going to be an engaging evening. You want to a little bit more about that?
It turns out that I have a baseball story about Jackie Robinson and Wendell Smith, whom you probably have never heard of, but who was very instrumental at getting Major League Baseball integrated. And you'll have to come to find out more about him. And I have one about a women's softball team in Washington State and something extraordinary that happened there. And Betty McCanty, now Betty is proudly admits that she is 89, she'll be 90 next year. But when she was a 12-year-old growing up in Buffalo, Buffalo had a farm team. And staying next door to her, renting a room, which often happened in the 20s and 30s, was one of the ball players that she had a 12-year-old crush on.
On a member of the Buffalo Bisons. That's
okay.
Yeah,
and so this is her story about her crush. And I can't remember his name, but he later became both a player and then a player manager for the Cleveland Indians. We took a trip together to Cooperstown a couple of summers ago to look up my people, the baseball players that I knew. And I grew up in a Yankee family, so I was very familiar with the 1960s Yankees. And the two men that I tell about, and then she looked up her fellow, and they let you go into the archives and you put on white gloves, and they gave her the file on her guy, and she looked through, and then she Xeroxed some of the pages because he left town and they lost touch, but he married, and so she wanted a few of those articles to remember him. So, and then we have other stories to fill in, to get people in the mood for Thanksgiving.
And about a year and a half ago, Betty was also the featured teller at Open Mic at Lena's. And when I got there, not only was I too late to sign up to tell, but I was almost too late to find a chair because of her notoriety in that town. So that should be her other story that has got nothing to do with baseball, but she also has that story about walking across the Niagara River frozen.
She walked across Niagara Falls and lived to tell about it.
And that's a great story. And she spent a lot of time, her husband was a dentist in Ballston Spa, so she has a lot of kind of wonderful stories about the village of Ballston Spa that are fun, too.
And she's the mother of 8.
Oh, yeah.
Though though I don't think she tells a lot of
No.
stories about them. She was a Latin and French teacher in the high school. So she does have one particularly wonderful story about the children, her students provoking her to say a word in French, which was a swear word in English.
Sounds like Betty. What else have we got going?
Okay, well, that's it for November. But December, on December 2nd, and you know, this show is distributed over several public service networks, public access TV shows, public access networks. There we go. And we're never quite sure when you're going to exactly be hearing us. So I included the December 2nd program, again at Cafe Lena at 2 p.m. And tell us about that, Joe.
Well, it's Stories of the Season, and it's an ecumenical holiday-themed program. And we're blessed at times to have an open date at Lena's. So we decided we'd take this matinee, and we've got 6 tellers lined up. You and I are going to be there. Betty Cassidy, Christy Keegan, and Margaret French, and Joe Peck. And those folks, most of whom are on our website, if you want to get a taste of that.
Oh, they all are.
But they all are. And it'll be stories of the season, so that it'll be Christmassy holiday cheer. It'll be a fun time. There will be eats, and it's about $12, so it's not expensive. And come on in. It's a really great season, wonderful venue to listen to stories.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if you can't come to our live performances, or one day you wake up and going, oh, I wish somebody would tell me a story. Well, you can go to us on YouTube. That if you go to storycircle@proctors.org and click on YouTube, there are over 70 stories there. And since February of 2011, over 13,000 stories have been watched on our YouTube channel, including Betty McCanty. She was our guest last month. Mm-hmm. And I think all those people that are telling this month. And if you'd like to help us, you again go to our website, storycircle@proctors.org, and click on how you can help. Because as with all arts organizations, our ticket sales do not cover our expenses. And really, most of the time, our tellers only get an honorarium, which means a little money so that they don't feel worthless, but not enough money that they could actually live on. Isn't that how you think of an honorarium?
That's an honorarium.
Yeah, it's an honor, but it's not, So if you would like to help, and my goal is twofold, is to produce events where storytellers get paid what they're worth so that they can live on their income. And second, so that everyone in the Capital District will know about all the myriad of forms of storytelling, as opposed to what most people think of as, you read books to children in libraries. That's a wonderful thing to do. But that's not what we consider storytelling. Storytelling is you're looking into people's eyes, there's no book between you, and you're sharing the experience.
The other adventure or connection that we've made recently is that for every ticket we sell at Proctor's for Telebration or for word plays, we're going to donate $2 to the Schenectady Inner City Ministry Summer Lunch Program. We felt that the congregations would benefit from having the fellowship opportunity of coming, and they're helping us promote storytelling at Proctor's, and we just thought it was the right thing to do. So if you want to add to your joy, actually, and sharing, then know that if you come to Telebration, that the cumulative effect could be a significant factor for the Sikkim Summer Lunch Program. And the Summer Lunch Program is important in Schenectady. 70% of the kids that are enrolled in the Schenectady system qualify for food subsidy, generally free lunch and breakfast. And when school's out, there's no way of distributing that necessary food. And while a portion of it is covered by the state, a large portion of it has to be met by other sources, about $10,000 a year. So, not to put in another plug, if you go to SCIM, SCIM.us, that's their website, you can make a contribution directly to the summer lunch program and know that it'll go to a good purpose. And if you want to help serve those lunches next summer, you can also find out more about how to see some of that work on the ground being accomplished.
Thank you, Joe. And you arranged that connection with us.
I've done some things with SCIM and do some things with SCIM, so I know whereof we speak there.
Yes, Joe, we have 8 minutes left. Do you have a short story?
Oh, gee whiz. Well, I've got one that'll be short. I can get it fit in by Thursday if I no. Actually, I've got a short story that's again both historical and out of my personal room. One of the things that Gay and I are involved with is an exchange between Schenectady and our sister city in the Netherlands, and we just finished hosting 15 folks from the Netherlands in September, and we were there a year ago for the second time as part of the exchange. And these exchanges are wonderful in that you get to know people. So you have a personal relationship with a town that is a very important part of our history, since Nijkerk is the town that Schenectady's founder came from, Aaron van Curler, and his uncle was Kilian van Rensselaer, who was one of the founders of the Dutch West India Trading Company, a diamond merchant, and he owned most of upstate New York at one point in time, because Van Curler was his manager of his colony. So we've been going back and forth, and when you read history, when you study history, you get some of the story, but sometimes you need a little bit more than that. And when you visit a place, you get a sense of the people and the situation. Now, one of our fellow Schenectady Nijkerkers is named Van Calhoun, and his mother was a Van Tassel, and they had a farm, and actually Van now lives back on the farm in Chatham in Columbia County. And he lives on land that his ancestors got as a grant for fighting in the Revolution. So that's the history, the connection there. And when the Nijkerkers were here the last time, he hosted a party at the farm. And one of the leaders of the Nijkerk Exchange got to talking about his family, the Van Tassels. And he said, well, you know about Van Tassel Island. And he says, well, that's where they're from. And Tassel was a place where people, it's known for its fair wind and its fresh water. And I heard this in passing, but it just went by me. History sometimes just goes by you. So we're on our way to Nijkerk, and we arrive, and there's a big potluck supper, and everybody's running around. And our host was Hooster Schagert, who was the part of the conversation about Tassel Island, and he's a sailor. He was a single-handed Nostar racer who actually was the first person to get to this country to start the exchange 25 years ago. And he comes up to where Van and his wife Sue are sitting, and he places a pile of paper. And he says, this is the history of the Van Tassel family on Tassel Island. And I think it would be fun if we all went there together on Saturday. And it was in English. And he had done some research. And so we don't know where we're going. So Saturday comes and we get in the car and we start to drive across Holland with the big super windmills making electricity. And we get to the end of the water and we get on a ferry and we go out to a barrier island that is Tassel Island. It's one of those barrier islands. And as we get off the ferry and we get to the little village, we get out of the car and I'm about to lose my hat. And I begin to get some sense of what fair wind is. So I make a comment to that, and who says to me, he says, oh no, but let's look which way the wind is blowing. Well, it's blowing right out of the west. Uh-huh. So here's the story of the whole Dutch advance in the world, internationally and through trade. When you sailed out of Amsterdam Harbor, out of the Rhine River, or out of the Zuider Zee, you sailed right into a headwind. And what you then did was you parked your boat, your ship, behind an island, behind Texel Island, and you waited for the wind to shift just enough so that you could sail with a little bit of the wind on your quarter, rather than having to beat that heavy boat all the way out. Now, it could take weeks for the wind to shift. So the fair wind you're waiting for required more fresh water, because if you were sailing between there and the New World or Indonesia, you needed to top off your water tanks and your provisions. So the Texel Islanders got rich selling water and provisions to the West Indiamen while they were waiting for the wind to change. Now, isn't that something? When you read the history of the Dutch exploration and all their establishment of New Amsterdam and Jakarta and places around the world, you would never think that to actually start the trip, they sailed into a headwind, and they had to wait for the fair wind and the fresh water of a little sandy spit of land that sticks out in the North Sea. So history lives in many different ways in the very winds that curl our hair and take our hats off our head. And the next time you're listening to the wind blow in the trees, be remembered of the stories that are traveling by you, just like that. A fair wind, fresh water, story of going to Texel Island.
Thank you, Joe. That was wonderful. That and the Dutch did do a lot of traveling. That storyteller Elizabeth Ellis, her daughter's husband's family is in Thailand, but of Dutch heritage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, they really traveled the world, and it wasn't easy. And another commercial, if any of you are out there and are interested in the Nijkerk Exchange, we're making plans next summer to go back to Nijkerk, and it's going to be the 600th anniversary of the city of Nijkerk, new church. The new church was actually built around 1315. But there's a website, or you can contact me. My coordinates are on our website. It's a great opportunity, and I'd encourage you, if you're interested or have Dutch heritage, to plug in.
Very good. Well, that about takes up our time for today. We have a little more than a minute left. I don't know if you have anything to end us off with.
Well, you know, there's an Irish blessing.
Oh, good.
And it's about the wind. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall soft upon your heels. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
Thank you, Joe. And thanks to all of you for spending an hour with us enjoying storytelling. We hope you join us again.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again,